Hello. Hello out there.
Hello.
How are y'all doing on this fine Monday?
Monday.
So Terry, what'd you think of Cats?
I thought it was, a little rote.
Yeah.
It's similar to a Broadway show that I've seen in the
Oh,
past.
yeah. So a little
It
derivative.
seemed like it kind of took that beat for beat.
Eh,
There's also some 19th century poetry that it reminded me of.
huh.
Um, but
That's
I
true.
got to see a lot of famous actors' furry crotches, so
Oh, there you
I
go.
guess trade offs.
I mean,
Um,
small price to pay, really. Yeah. Yeah. So that one bankrolled a solid 7 million in its opening weekend.
What I heard that the studio executives just thought they wouldn't have to market it,
Yeah.
that it would just sell
It would
itself.
market itself. It would market itself. What do you think of the new Taylor Swift song? I mean, it's cool. I mean, Taylor Swift and Beyonce adding songs to musicals that everyone already liked all the music to and didn't need another song. That's what they're doing in 2019. Actually, I haven't seen Cats, and I have no plans to see
No,
Cats.
I don't even like real life cats.
Oh boy. So yeah, we're here to talk the Rise of Skywalker. There's gonna be spoilers. We're gonna talk about spoilers. So if you're here and you haven't seen the movie, it's really bold of you to come into a stream Monday when the movie's been out in the States since Thursday, and hope that it's gonna be spoiler free, but it's not. So you know, if
I mean, like, really though, because like I'm fixing to list all of the things that blew my mind about this
yeah,
film, and every single one of them is going to be a spoiler.
yep.
So like, this is the place for you to hop off board.
I was gonna say, if you haven't already begun to serve our Empress Ray Palpatine, this was a bad time to come into the stream.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, let's dive in. You guys might notice below me is the logo and not the chat. We've been having issues with the chat on screen, and I didn't feel like figuring it out. But the chat live will always be next to the video if you're watching this later. So your words are recorded by YouTube. They just won't be on the screen for this particular time. But other than that, it's gonna be pretty normal.
Archived for all of human history.
Yep. Someday somebody will go back and find your YouTube comment on this stream and be like, "So that's what they thought of the Rise of Skywalker." So be careful.
Yeah.
So fair warning. I think this is a pretty fair warning too. Besides spoilers, you and I both liked the film.
Yep, I remember. Let me even just pull it up
Yep.
because, like, I think as soon as I came out of the film, I texted you.
Yep.
And
Hey
of
Jetman.
course,
Hey
we've talked
Sin.
so much since then. I've got to scroll back.
Hey
This
John.
is, I could have done preparation ahead of time.
When do we ever prepare? We never do.
But like I came out of it
Mm-hmm.
thinking like I loved it from start to finish. Like
Yeah.
there were things, I don't think it's like, a perfect
No.
film, gonna
No.
sweep the Oscars or anything like
Right.
that. But in terms of what I wanted from this film, I feel like it delivered everything I wanted
Yep.
in ways that I didn't expect. And I really did. Like, it throws you right in it.
Yep.
Like, and I'm glad that you had told me that
Yeah.
it kind of tosses you right in.
Yep.
Because I don't know. Did you see Gravity?
I never got
Sandra Bullock?
I never got around to it. I've seen the IKEA parody of Gravity, but that's
Oh
about
yeah.
it.
Because like I felt like with Gravity, like right from the moment that film started, like I was literally like anxious on the edge of my seat, like could not breathe.
Right.
And that's how I was with this, because it tosses you right in, even like the crawl. It's like
Yeah.
the dead speak.
The dead
And
speak.
I'm like, okay, this is where we are now.
Well, I told you with Force Awakens, like I saw the line in theaters for the first time, Luke Skywalker has vanished, and at that point, like I lost all ability to think, and I was just like on this road. It was the same thing that happened. It was like the dead speak. I'm like, okay, we're just gonna start this up and go with that.
And then it jumps right into the scene with Kylo on, I guess what we know now is Mustafar.
Yes.
And then like 2 seconds later, he's in front of Palpatine, and they're like,
all
"Oh
of
nope,
that. Nerp.
Like
We're right there.
Snoke was nothing. Everything you ever heard was me in your head,
Like,
including like
go,
you thinking
go,
you were
go,
talking
go,
to your
go.
granddad.
Yep.
I'm actually
Which
alive
like
somehow.
that was something you and I had talked about, by the way.
Oh, I know, right? But it was just like we're like 2 minutes into the film, and I'm like, oh, okay.
Okay, we're just gonna go.
here we
I
are. Like we're just gonna jump right into it. It's like when you go to the pool and like you don't bother with the stairs. Like you
you
just
just
cannonball right in
go.
the deep end.
I remember it was like the first couple of minutes. So you have that sequence, you have the crawl, you have Kylo finding Palpatine, and Palpatine being like, "Don't kill me. I'll give you everything if you do this one thing. Kill Rey. But hey, here's a secret." And then it cuts to the Jarek table. And like I just looked over at the person I was sitting next to, and I was just like, I'm already exhausted. Like at that point, I wanted to hit pause and take a minute. Real quick, we have Toucan. Play at that in the chat. Hello from London. Hello. What do you think Finn wanted to tell Rey? I'm pretty sure JJ, if not, I don't think John Boyega said it, but JJ has come out and said that he was trying to tell Rey that he was force sensitive. Which, in fairness, probably could have been said a little clearer in the film, but I feel like, especially when you see him feeling Rey die towards the end, like I think that's really what they wanted to talk about. But yeah, Snoke was a literal puppet. Yeah, so I think my mind on the beginning was just crazy because it was like, okay, they're telling us Palpatine is back in the frickin' crawl, and then it was Mustafar, which it looked like Mustafar from space. On the ground, it looked different, but I've been told that Vader Immortal, the VR game, is about like Mustafar changing, and so that's why it looked different. And then he's actually supposed to be at Vader's castle, and so like my mind's like spinning through all of that, and like literally, I think the two Snokes in a jar. Like my brain just shut off for a second.
Right.
I was like, oh, and I think it was important that there were two, because if you just saw the one, you would think it was just Snoke's body. Like Palpatine somehow collected Snoke's body for some reason. But like the two Snokes, you're like, what on earth? And so you were saying like the first 10 minutes of this movie just like answers so many questions we've just been sitting on for like 4 years. And one of them was Snoke is literal Sith spawn. Like Sith spawn is a curse in Star Wars, but it's also because it's a Sith experiment. So presumably Snoke is some kind of Sith experiment that's been manipulating Kylo.
I will tell you, a lot of that reminded me, and I don't think this was meant to be like an adaptation or anything,
right?
But it reminded me of the laboratory that the Sith guy had in Red Harvest.
Yes, yes.
When he was, keeping the guy alive to like experiment on, or even like in the Plagueis novel where Plagueis keeps the guy alive for like decades to try to do experiments.
Right.
Like I thought it was very much in that vein. And I like that a lot because it makes sense in terms of like what Palpatine would want to accomplish too.
Well, and I want to kind of talk through this because I feel like, at some level, talking about this film, it might be a little bit impossible to avoid discourse just because it's so fresh. But like to avoid it as much as possible. One thing I've been seeing online is people didn't really follow Palpatine's plan through the movie, but I mean, I don't want to sound like I get it, but like I feel like I didn't really struggle with what Palpatine was doing. But if we kind of want to talk about at least what he's up to at the beginning of the film, people kind of been talking about, Snoke. We were told for so long that like Snoke was manipulating Ben and turning Ben, and Leia even says that in Force Awakens. I think it's just simply Palpatine was always behind it. They didn't know. And one thing, as you know, I just recently finished going through the Aftermath books, and in the Aftermath books, there's this implication that a dark presence is sensing Ben in Leia's womb. And we always thought it was Snoke, but I don't think that's that hard to rectify. It's because it was never Snoke in Aftermath. We made that assumption because we had seen the movies that it's Palpatine at that point, unless he already had Snoke as a puppet. For me, it's just, at what point did Palpatine become a body again? At what point did he come back? And at what point did he create Snoke? That's really the only things we don't know.
Right.
But like, what are your thoughts there?
Well, I thought a couple of things. One, I think now I'm reminded of how much of canon stuff right after like or even like before the Force Awakens, like all hinted about like, Operation Cinder, and we have all the Sentinels, and Aftermath has the through line of Palpatine is interested in the unknown regions all of a sudden. And then the Imperial fleet disappears. And I feel like like this plays into all of that. I think it's very easy to say that this was, if not Palpatine's complete contingency, at least part of it, to say
Right.
there's a chance somewhere in here I could. I mean, he had the chosen one as his apprentice. Like there
Right.
was always a chance that he might die at
Right.
some point.
Right.
Like that's what the rule of two is about. Like you have
Right.
two of us, and eventually one of us murders the other,
Yep.
and like that's
That's how it works.
our entire order is premised on the fact that I might die eventually.
Right.
And I don't think that it's like I think it makes perfect sense that Palpatine would want that. And again, we don't know what all the particulars are of that. I'm assuming Palpatine says he died, and
Right.
I'm willing to take that at face value that
Yep.
he like physically died. I'm also reminded of like I'm a big Tolkien fan,
Mhm.
and I'm reminded of Sauron existing sort of incorporeally
Mhm.
for a period of time, and I'm kind of thinking along those lines too. But we know that like Sith magic is a thing. We
Right.
know that Sith like science experiments are a thing. Even if it's just legends now, I feel like that still serves the purpose of saying
Right.
well, that there were stories about this, and so like I think it really fits to me, and I think that for Palpatine to have kind of festered for 35 years now,
Right.
um, I think it makes sense that he would like, oh no, this is the final order now.
Yeah.
I'm not playing around anymore.
This
Like
is
I
it.
have, like how we always talked about. We felt like, and we talked about this a lot in our watch through of the films,
Yeah.
but that by the time of the Phantom Menace, like Palpatine revealed himself when he knew he had already won.
Yes.
I think that's what this is now too. Like he has
Yeah.
a huge fleet, each of
Mhm.
which is equipped with a planet killer,
Yep.
and he's like, and no, for real this time, until I know I can win, I'm gonna
Yep.
stay out here in nowhere.
Yep.
And this is that coming to fruition. This is him saying, um, I've got this now. Like
Yeah.
there's like I'm certain of it.
Mhm.
And I think as far as, and I'll let you say more things in a minute.
You're fine. I've already
But
done a 35-minute video, so I'm very interested in what you have to say.
but I almost feel like too, and people may disagree with this because I
Mhm.
feel like Palpatine is the master planner. He always has been.
Yep.
And I feel like in terms of like what the film itself shows us across 2.5 hours about what his plan was, I think he ultimately is fine with either Rey or
Yep.
Ben.
I completely agree.
If Kylo kills Rey, he wins.
Yep.
If Rey kills Kylo and he can turn Rey, he wins.
Yep.
If she doesn't turn, he can kill her and he wins.
Yep.
Like I think which one of those he preferred almost doesn't matter in that
Right.
moment because
It's the same with
like
the war.
Palpatine being Palpatine
Yeah.
like creates a scenario where he's fine with every option.
Right.
He just doesn't anticipate, you know, every Jedi from beyond the grave,
Right.
helping Rey
Helping her
defeat
out.
him.
Exactly. Oh man. Yeah, I know, and that just makes me want to jump to the end of the film. But yeah, no, I agree at that point. Because that was another thing I've been seeing is people talk about there's so much established in canon that uh Palpatine slash Snoke was reaching out and talking to Ben. And one thing I'm kind of curious about, I'm not upset that we don't know this already. I just want to know it eventually. I don't think it needed to be said in the movie. But I want to know to what extent Snoke was sentient and to what
Mm-hmm.
extent was he a literal puppet. Because like I understand that we hear Palpatine make Snoke's voice, but okay. Like I want to know to what extent was Snoke a free operator under Palpatine's control, and to what was he like a literal soulless puppet? But
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure we'll know eventually.
Well, and I think my answer for that right now comes based on something I saw on Wikipedia's
Mhm.
Instagram,
Yeah,
which I think they got this from the Visual Dictionary, which I don't know has been released yet. I'm
it
sure
has.
they've got
It
early
it
copies.
is. No, it
Okay,
came out the day the movie premiered, so it's
okay,
brand
but
new.
so like one of the factoids that they got out of that were the Sith troopers who
Yep.
turned out to be red stormtroopers. Called that one. Um, but um, that they had a special type of imprinting that
Yeah.
even though they weren't clones, they weren't like brainwashed from childhood like first order troopers.
Yeah.
That they had like mental imprinting,
Mhm.
and that was a Kaminoan technique. So like
Mhm.
they weren't clones, but they had like cloning mental techniques, and I can see that having happened with Snoke too. Like
Yeah.
Snoke being imprinted with memories or imprinted with like mental programming essentially, and
Right.
then being sentient beyond
Yeah,
that.
I could totally see that also.
But
Um,
'cause I don't it's not my thought anyway that Palpatine is like literally puppet
right.
mastering him the whole time.
Well,
What Snoke's force powers would be in that moment, I think would complicate that question a little bit, but
yeah. Well, and
um
his awareness of the bond, which
yeah,
is something I'd kind of talk about at the end of the movie, because Snoke is aware of a bond between Kylo and Rey. Palpatine seems fairly either unaware or uninterested in it, because he's definitely surprised at the end that he can charge himself with their bond, and
right.
adapts to that. But anyway, that's what I was talking about too, though, is you have that with Snoke. But my kind of thought was, one thing you and I had discussed before we got into the movie is when we thought Palpatine might be a Force ghost instead of whatever he was. And I really like that we don't really fully know. I mean, the
Mm-hmm.
obvious kind of, like, if you were to say, like, you have to guess right now, I would say clone. But I don't know that it's super obvious. It's a body hooked up to a machine, and we don't really know what's going on there. But it, I think that we used to think that it could be a ghost that's centered in a place, in the same way you look at like the Momin spirit in the Momin mask and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of wonder if, because this Exegol is supposed to be like the center of Sith power, if he was able to travel back there. Like, to what extent is this planet like a nexus between
No,
reality and non-reality? I'm
he
actually,
said his spawn there.
yeah, exactly. It's his spawn point. But to that point, I'm gonna take a page out of, for those of you who watch Star Wars Explained, he likes to compare literally everything ever to something from Battlestar Galactica. But one thing that happens in Battlestar Galactica is the Cylons have multiple
Mm-hmm.
bodies, and when one dies, their brain basically downloads and goes to a resurrection ship where they can like re-upload. So they do really die, and they do experience that death, but they're like reborn on the ship. Now they're also robots, so that makes it a little bit easier. But I could see it as he has something set up on Exegol that's like a like a beacon, like his soul. Is actually something like that happens in Fringe, which is another J.J. Abrams creation. So that could be something like that too. There's like an object that's tuned to somebody's soul, that so when they die, they can like travel to that place. And I could see something like that with Palpatine as well, because Palpatine does say he died. And Anakin, when we hear Anakin's voice, does say he balanced the Force. Um, so I think there's something to that as well.
I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense too, and I think we could even potentially see some world between worlds kind of thing going
Right.
on
Oh,
there.
100%.
Where if Palpatine has bodies laying around, that this becomes some sort of way of
Mhm.
explaining that too, or explaining how he is able to control Snoke to the extent that he does.
Right.
Like, I think we already have enough lore that and I want more specific answers to these questions, but I
Yeah.
feel like we have enough Star Wars lore that exists now to give us enough of that I don't need to
Yeah. And,
understand all the particulars in order to enjoy the film.
well, and I said this in my review, that I'm kind of happy that we didn't get all of the answers, because whatever the answer is to whatever Palpatine did with himself and whatever he did with Snoke is going to be some sort of really in-depth explanation. It's going to be some sort of really weird Force thing that is way better explained in a novelization, in a guidebook, in a novel that just tells that story. Where for those of us who really, really care, it can be explained really, really well in a way that works really well within the canon. There was just no way to really explain that in a way the general audience is going to care about. So you just stick the Palpatine body on a weird machine and say he's back, and like that's good enough for, you know, Aunt Lucy that you're gonna take to the movie, and you're good to go.
Right. I mean, and I think it's also, I don't think this is the case, but I think
Mhm.
it would make sense, if Snoke had originally been a person
Mhm.
who like brought Palpatine back through a Sith ritual, and then Palpatine was like, okay, now I'm back.
I could see
I'll
that as
I'll
well.
take things from here.
Like,
Um,
I got this, but thanks.
yeah. um, But I mean, but we know that Palpatine, just like Anakin was obsessed with life after death. So
Yep.
like to think that he didn't have some sort of plan,
Right.
like I think is like it's obvious that he would. I think.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm saying in the chat we have connections to both Voldemort and Sauron
yep.
in other stories as well. So I mean, it's not an uncommon thing, and I think in one of my redemption videos, I can't remember which one, but I talk about Palpatine and I talk about why people, will look at a character like Kylo or Ben Solo and there'll be a question of redemption, which is no longer a question. And then you look at a character like Palpatine and you won't think he needs to be redeemed, which, thanks to this movie, I now have more thoughts on.
So,
So many
aren't you glad
wonderful.
you hadn't done that video yet?
I'm so glad I haven't done that video yet. But I talked about how like Palpatine is like the representation of the devil in Star Wars. Like he is the physical manifestation of evil, which is why, from a story sense, you're never waiting for his redemption because he's supposed to be evil. He's, at the end of the day, you need that one person that is the true conflict. And it kind of makes sense. And I think like I get why it's frustrating that he just kind of shows up in this movie and shows up in the crawl, and it feels very like added on at the end. I do really truly believe that JJ. I think if JJ knew he was making 9 when he made 7, he would have put more clear directions to Palpatine in the movie. I really do believe that bringing Palpatine back was a thing he always wanted to do. But I don't think he either didn't want to do it or wasn't allowed to do it because he was only making 7, and they didn't want him to dictate the next 2 movies.
Right.
And so that's kind of a. I mean, I've said on videos before the movie came out, I was apprehensive about Palpatine coming back, but I was going to be okay with it depending on how they did it, and I like how they did it, and that.
Yep, me too.
I was okay with it.
I mean, and that was probably the thing that I was most apprehensive about, and I'm excited about it. So
Yeah,
like, if
I got so into it.
that's a sign of like how well this landed for me.
Look, I'm gonna be honest. The reason why I am so okay with it is the reason why most people hate it. Because I mean, from the conversations I've been saying for a while that I thought it was gonna end up being Rey was an experiment of Palpatine. And I was mostly saying that because I really didn't think, or I really thought we had gotten the answer to her parentage. And so I was saying there's gonna be some kind of connection. So when Kylo meets Palpatine and he's like, "Hey, you gotta kill Rey, but you don't know who she is." At first, I'm like, I knew it. She's gonna be an experiment, but there was a small voice in the back of my head that goes, "They're not really gonna do it, are they? Like, they're not really gonna give me this." And then literally, I remember I was sitting in the theater, and Kylo goes, "My mother is the daughter of Darth Vader, and your father is the son of Palpatine. We have a bond. We're a dyad in the Force, and you are a Palpatine." And I'm sitting there like, okay. Anything this movie does now, I just accept. Like,
yep.
like I've literally I understand at the end of the movie she takes the name Skywalker, and that's something else we can discuss. But I've literally been walking around my house just going Rey Palpatine, Rey Palpatine, Rey Palpatine, and saying it to myself over and over, just because I love it. I love it so much, and like that's why I'm okay with all of this.
Well, and I think too. So with Rey's parentage all along, I'm a skeptical kind of person by nature.
Yeah.
And like my whole thing all along is I was going to believe that Rey was no one until I felt there was sufficient evidence to say otherwise.
Right.
It wasn't that I necessarily needed her to be one thing or another, or that I necessarily minded her being one thing or another.
Right.
As long as it made sense and there was an explanation for it. And that's exactly what we got.
Yep.
We even talked about this last week when we were talking about The Last Jedi. I asked you the question of whether or not Kylo lied to her, or did he just not know the whole story? And the answer is he just didn't know the whole story. Like, he knows what Snoke or the Force through Palpatine, however that worked. whether it was the Force revealing him a partial picture, or like I guess we don't know the particulars of that, but he didn't know the whole story, and that's what he tells her.
Right.
He said, "What I told you wasn't wrong. Like, I've never lied to you," and I think
Mhm.
it's important that he says he never lies to her,
Yep.
because I think that speaks a lot about
And that's
his
not a
own
lie.
personal motivations. Yeah, well, yeah, um, but um, but he says, I didn't know the whole thing, and
Right.
they did sell you there, but they did it on purpose, and you are a nobody, but because they wanted to make you a nobody
Right.
to protect you, and all of that makes perfect sense to me. And so, like, I'm completely on board for our Empress.
Yeah, for our true empress, our Jedi empress, really. I mean, she's that's her power. I and like for me, I really get why people were apprehensive of it, because as much as since Force Awakens, I wanted her to be related to somebody. It wasn't because I thought she was a Mary Sue. It wasn't because I needed her power. I've never needed Rey's power explained. I've
Me either.
said before, the vast majority of Jedi in the prequel trilogy did not have Force sensitive parents because of the way the Jedi worked in the prequel trilogy. In fact, I've been using that as an argument for people for a while now. Is like people like to talk about Rey being a nobody as making it this special plot, and I'm like, I don't want to say Rey isn't special, but like that aspect of her isn't, because thousands of Jedi in the prequel trilogy all had that same story. Um, and that doesn't make Rey's story not compelling if she's a nobody, but it just means it's not as unique as people like to pretend it is. People like to pretend it's unique because people like to pretend the prequels don't exist. That's why it seems unique. Um,
Yep.
but I never needed that. Welcome, Knox. Good to see you. I never needed her to be somebody to explain her power. It wasn't. I didn't need an explanation. I wanted to include her. Like, I liked her so much. I wanted her to be related to other characters that I liked, as like a compliment. I don't know if that makes sense.
Right.
So I was coming out of Force Awakens, and it just seemed like she was going to be related to someone. And then Ryan took the story where he took it, and I accepted her being a nobody because I genuinely believe what Ryan Johnson did in The Last Jedi was really beautiful and poetic. And I could accept a story not being what I wanted because it was done so well. But then because I already adapted to something I wasn't rooting for the moment we went back to something I was rooting for, I'm like, okay,
Right.
this is fine. I'm okay.
Well, and I think the point of the Last Jedi for Rey,
Yeah.
for me, is not that she was nobody, but that she felt like she had to be somebody in order
Right.
to be important.
Right.
And so the lesson she learns in the Last Jedi is, like, she is valuable because she is Rey.
Right.
Like, she doesn't need anything else to be important.
Right.
But then when she learns she is, like, the question now becomes, okay, well, you got what you wanted originally.
Yep.
After you've learned this lesson, like, what do you do with it then?
Right.
um
And I think it's a very different story for her if she had learned who she was before she learned that lesson.
no, I think it's completely different.
Yep.
Because I think then you don't learn the important lesson, because I mean, I think if she does not get the character growth that she gets in The Last Jedi, she
Yep.
is not able to stand up to Palpatine at
Yep.
the end.
I
Like,
completely agree.
it's like, I think if she shows up, if in The Force Awakens she rolls up
Yeah.
at Exegol, and
Yep.
Palpatine's like, "Oh, you're my granddaughter, and I want you to rule the galaxy." Like, I
Right.
think I think Force Awakens Rey pauses for a moment because she doesn't know what's going on, but then she's like, "Okay, like, I have a family now. Let's rule the galaxy."
Right.
Like, in not necessarily like, super evil Sith kind of way, but that's exactly what she wanted. And
Right.
if she doesn't have that growth and she wanted, she can't see,
Mhm.
no, I'm going to go with the family I'm going to choose. I'm going to
Right.
go with the people who have supported me. I'm going to go with the Jedi who are the guardians of justice and
Right.
and right in this galaxy. And I feel like it's a completely different thing if we don't get the lesson that she learned in the Last Jedi.
No, I agree. Welcome, Andy. Yeah, I totally get where you're coming from. You said you prefer to be nobody. I was saying like 2 minutes ago, I don't mind that story. I just think that negates literally every nobody who's a Jedi in the prequel trilogy. Like, it's a good story. I just don't think it's as unique as people like to pretend it is. Um,
Well, but we still also have, I don't want to pivot. Well, before I say that, I'll say
okay.
really quickly to Knox's point. Um, I thought that I would not have been surprised if JJ had
Yeah,
Kylo say from a
from a
certain
certain
point of
point of
view.
view.
Where that's different for me is that Obi-Wan was intentionally being misleading with Luke,
Right.
and Kylo was intentionally telling Rey the truth as it had been revealed to him.
I mean, he was
So like I don't feel
embellishing a
like the
lot.
line right, but I don't feel like the line fits
Right.
as much as I would have loved another callback because that's the type of fanboy that I
Yeah.
am. But speaking of things you really like, the other thing that I would say to I wish Rey had been a nobody because I was in that camp for a long time.
Hmm.
We have another person who is
Yes.
force sensitive
Thank
and
you.
is force sensitive without having being part of a dynasty of force
Yes.
users, and
Preach
his
it.
name is Finn.
Hmm.
So I
Who did
know
not
this
take
was
a
something
last
you
name
felt
either.
right, yeah. So like this is something you felt very strongly about, for the last several years.
Yep.
So talk to me a little bit about that.
I can talk about Finn for days. Finn, I love Finn. I love Finn so much with my whole heart. And I think I talked about this in our Force Awakens stream. How I really wanted like Force sensitive Finn. Like I was kind of like I wasn't let down that Rey was a hero in the Force Awakens at all. I was let down that Finn just was not also Force sensitive when we kind of got to the Last Jedi, and it was just never brought up. And then I had a couple of years of people telling me stop wishing for force sensitive Finn because that's somehow a detriment to his character because people are insane. I try to be very nice about other people's opinions, but Finn is one I will not shut up about and I will not compromise on. I love force sensitive Finn. It made me so happy. Because like I've even told you, like we would talk about the saber pole from the Force Awakens, and that's like everyone's favorite scene in the Force Awakens. And for me, I never didn't like it, but it was always like, okay, like I was like, yeah, but for me that moment was, oh, so it's not Finn. Like that's literally what that moment was for me for 4 years. Now I rewatched Force Awakens over the weekend, and now I love that moment because now that's Rey Palpatine standing in front of Ben Solo with the lightsaber. She's gonna face her grandfather down in a same exact pose, only less confidently, and I love it now. But
Yeah.
especially knowing that I still get Force sensitive Finn, so now I love that moment, and it's probably one of my favorites. But up until that point, it was not because I was let down by not having Force sensitive Finn. And that's what I keep saying is people are like, we loved Rey because she was just Rey. She didn't need a last name. Well, Finn doesn't have a last name because they decided not to do Storm Pilot, so he didn't take anybody's name yet. You never know what'll happen in the books. But Finn's just Finn. He doesn't have a name. He's force sensitive. He's a little nobody. He has this like great storyline of leaving behind the First Order and leaving behind injustice and like standing for all of it. Finn is literally who everybody wanted Rey to be. And so basically what happened was they marketed Finn as the main character in The Force Awakens, and then they were like, JK LOL, it's Rey. And then they were like, Rey is this person. And then now they're like, hey, JK LOL, Rey's actually this person. And Finn is the person we always promised you he was going to be. And anyway, I loved it. I'm happy. I'm
Well,
very
and
happy.
I think I will tell you the Last Jedi. As much as I love this, the Last Jedi has a very special place in my heart, and I don't say any of this to undermine
Yeah.
anything I loved about the Last Jedi.
Yep.
But I think that is a benefit of something that we might not have gotten had JJ not been the creative mind behind this last film.
Right.
Because I think JJ can say, "Oh no, for like Finn was force sensitive before too. Like
Right.
it was just a MacGuffin for Rey's sake."
Right.
But I don't want to leave it that way, and so I'm going to double back to that and remind you, oh no, he was supposed to be force sensitive all along.
Right.
Like that's like I don't feel like that's a retcon.
No,
Like
no.
I think that's JJ coming in and saying, oh no, there was something there.
Yeah.
Let me make it more explicit for you.
Well, and I always say people forget, to the detriment of the understanding of the sequel trilogy, that The Last Jedi is literally days after The Force Awakens. So
Yeah, sure.
you really have like the characters that they are in The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi, and then you have the characters they are in The Rise of Skywalker. And where people say
Right.
like the characters didn't feel the same as they did in the last two movies. Well, no, duh. This is a year later, where the last two movies were the same week. Like that's why
Yeah.
they suddenly feel different. Is there's finally been time for the characters to change. Just because we had 2 years in between the movies doesn't mean they did. But I don't think it is inconsistent for Finn to not necessarily have had like this understanding that it's the Force he's feeling in the Last Jedi, because I don't think he really understands he feels the Force in the Force Awakens. I think
Right.
he's like freaking out and he's doing all of these things, and then that year where he's spending time with Rey and seeing what Rey's doing and how she's described, because they're friends and they would be talking about things. I think that's when you can go, oh, this thing she's describing, I think I feel it too. And maybe he's not being trained by Leia, which, by the way, love that too. But there's
Yep.
another thing we can get to. Maybe he's not training under Leia, but if he's just having conversations with Rey, he can listen to what Rey says and be unknowingly trained by her. And I don't think it is a contradiction or retcon. I think it's just what happens when time passes.
Well, and I think we've talked before about how, even before we knew Rey was a Palpatine,
Mm-hmm.
I thought, and I still think that Rey took so quickly to the Force because she believed so earnestly in it,
Yes,
and
I still
I
agree
don't
with
think
that.
her,
Yep.
I don't think her being a Palpatine undermines that.
Yep.
But Finn didn't. Like
Yeah.
that was his struggle, is he did not know who he like. The same with Rey, he didn't know who he was supposed to be.
Right.
But he is not as earnest about everything as Rey is.
Right.
Like he's the one that wants to, to take off. That's what Maz says to him, which I'm reading that line differently again now too. When Maz says, "You have eyes that I've seen before,"
Right.
that makes me ask questions now that Finn is Force sensitive. But Finn wants to leave. Finn wants to take off, and he's like, "I got to get away from this."
Right.
Like, and he's in a different place, and it makes sense that it would take him longer to come
Yeah.
around
No.
to
Yeah.
understanding what that means for him.
Yeah. Just
Um,
the surroundings he had been in, and especially the First Order would say the Force isn't real, and that sort of thing. So
yeah,
I can totally see that. And yeah, I think Rey takes to the Force because of belief. I think her being a Palpatine really just has more to do with her bond with Kylo and being a dyad
right,
and being the one who can stop Palpatine. But it's not because of her. Like, that's not her Force powers in of itself.
right. Well, and I think with Finn too, I think I didn't think about this before, but you were saying a minute ago that the First Order, would have
Yeah.
denied the things about the Jedi. That was one of the things we learned in Force Collector too, is just how many
Yes.
people thought the Jedi were completely a myth altogether. Like
Yep.
this literally was not a thing.
Yep.
And I think that's a bigger leap for Finn than it is for Rey too.
Yeah, I would agree.
But I will also say for the record, I was hardcore Storm Pilot for a long time, and I gave up on it in the Last Jedi, honestly.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
but
when Poe ran to BB-8 before he ran to Finn,
no,
that's when
broke my little
I was
Last Jedi heart.
that's when I was kind of convinced. That said, Resistance Reborn is a Storm Pilot book.
Oh no, it definitely is.
I was
Um,
I was like I was blushing a little bit with some of the stuff that was going on in there. I was like, oh boy,
um,
okay.
but I'll also say this too, just because I want to go on the record with this,
Yeah.
given that we're still close to the film.
Yeah.
I kind of like, in a way, in which I want to talk about the Raylo stuff eventually. Sometime we're almost
Sure.
like 45 minutes into this,
I
and
know.
we've talked about
Oh, this
nothing.
is this is gonna be a long stream. There's gonna be
Yeah,
multiple streams, I think.
this is gonna be like a 72-hour stream.
Yep.
Just I hope you brought something to eat. Um, but um, we'll be here next Christmas still on
Yep.
the same stream.
I mean, we
Um,
have 3 years to the next movie, so that's how long we're gonna be gushing about this one.
but given what we know about the prequel trilogy's Jedi rules about relationships,
Yes.
I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing that the two Force sensitive characters we know of now aren't in them. Not that I'm opposed to either of the relationships that they would have been in,
Right.
but
Right.
I think as having a starting point for a new Jedi Order with Rey and Finn,
Yep.
I'm not opposed to the idea of them going into that. I mean, because honestly, at this point, I don't see Rey ever having another relationship.
Right. Well,
and
I think
what
her
that means for Finn, I don't know either.
I
But
mean, I choose to believe her boyfriend is currently living in her head, and that's why he was not a Force ghost at the end of the movie. So
well, yeah, there you go too. I'm down for some Luke and Callista action.
I never
But
thought I would be okay with a concept from Children of the Jedi until I became that much into the Reylo relationship. So that's what that did to me. This movie
see,
did
now
things to
I've
me.
just primed you for that for the last 2
No,
years.
this is how much the Rise of Skywalker has changed me because one, I'm suddenly okay with Force Ghost sex, and two, I'm suddenly okay with Palpatine having a first name because now there's two Palpatines. So like this movie has fundamentally changed me as a Star Wars fan. Like it has converted me. It has opened my mind. I don't know what to tell you. Or the two oh the folks at the end. Are we planning on talking about the two girlfriends in the stream, or is that for another? Do you mean the couple that kissed at the end of the movie, or you mean like girlfriends, like two chicks who go to the restroom together because women can't go to the bathroom by themselves? Like what? I mean, like
I'm guessing it means the kiss, by
I'm
which
guessing.
I'll just say I'm down for
Yes,
it.
it's. I mean, like I feel like people are gonna criticize it in the same way that like the one Russo brother was like, "I'll play a gay man" at the beginning of um uh at the beginning of Endgame, where people are like, "That's nice," but oh, okay. Oh no, you meant the new female NPCs for Finn and Poe. I don't.
No, and then
I haven't. I don't
I
even
think
understand. Oh, you
I
mean
think
like
that's a joke.
Jana? Oh, Jana and Zori?
Oh, or well, maybe so, maybe so.
Oh, okay. I literally did not understand what you're talking about. I don't. I mean, Jana and Zori, like obviously there used to be a thing between Zori and Poe. Like that's pretty well established. But I mean, I did like that moment at the end where Poe was like, and she was like, like there weren't even words. Like I thought that was really cute. But like I'm content with that just being what it was. Like they're like flings from the past. Jana, like they could be a couple, but like it honestly, the moment they had on the Falcon was so sweet and adorable and innocent. It felt more like two 5-year-olds, like who were both scared at school. Like, oh man, you feel
Yeah.
this way too? Like, I took it that way. As they felt like, oh, so you think they were added just to like more so hide, like more so go against Storm Pilot? I guess I didn't see it that way. I mean, I guess I wouldn't put it past Disney to do that. I don't think Kathleen Kennedy would do that, but like Disney could dictate it maybe, but I don't think so. Welcome,
I
Cal.
don't think they would have either, but I didn't read Jana as being like a serious romantic character for Finn anyway.
Yeah.
Given that, I mean, and maybe this is because of Resistance Reborn 2, where Finn is like, no, I'm really not into relationships.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, because
maybe I'm taking
he's
that
just
at face value.
he's just friends with Ray. He's just friends with Rose, and Poe can't keep up with his just friends. I mean, maybe, and like I said, when you get to the books, it's completely different because LGBT couples and stuff have been like that representation's been way different in the books and comics than it's been on screen. And like
Yeah.
I get the frustrations people have with stuff on screen, um, but I don't think there's the same need to hide something once the stories would well, and I mean I don't know that we know that Finn is more along the not interrelationships information, but that's just kind of something that got put in Resistance Reborn. But like I don't know that it matters. And I mean, at the end of the day, they could always be bi. I mean, like just because they had a woman fling doesn't mean that you still
I
can't have
mean,
Storm Pilot.
I'm down for a Poe and Finn and Zori thruple. Just throwing that out there. I don't know.
But
It's
like,
space. Do what you want to.
it's space. We don't even know what kind of danger Claude was getting into. I mean, come on. You read Jana's simply platonic counterpart. Yeah, like they felt like two 5-year-olds to me. Like, and I don't mean that in a dismissive way. I mean, it was like this really cute moment of going back to it, this childhood innocence, because they had this
Lando
same.
was in love with a droid, so I mean, we were all fine with that. I don't see why any of this matters.
Yeah.
But, you know, like L3 said, it works.
It worked.
So, um,
Oh
But
man, but
I did like Jana as a character
I
though.
did
I
too.
knew nothing about her like we all did going into it,
Right.
but I liked the idea that there were other people, whether that means they're all force sensitive or not. I don't think
Yeah.
that's necessarily the implication. I think you could read it that way.
Yeah.
But I like the idea that there were more people who were able to resist the first order uh programming,
Right.
and say, and I like that her story was so similar to Finn's too. This idea the first time I'm in battle, I'm like, oh no, this is bad. Um, I like that too.
We're meant to evolve. Listen, I feel like Disney would have primed us a little bit. They have primed us in the books though. Like, look at Alphabet Squadron.
Yep.
Look at the Doctor Aphra comic.
Look at
Um,
Aftermath
Look at Aftermath. Like, I feel like that type of,
and Last Shot.
yeah, it's very primed in literally everything except for anything that makes it to screen.
Um,
I don't care about yeah. Zori, close on Zori spelling. You just needed another R. Was worried about it. Yeah, it could be, but I liked Jana a lot. I think that you can make an argument that maybe they're all force sensitive because maybe the force sensitivity is the reason why they could resist the programming.
right.
And that makes logical sense. Or at the very least, the leaders within the group could resist the programming and then help others within. But I don't know that we I don't know that we need to. I don't know you can make the jump to the conclusion like all of them were force sensitive. And I think Finn kind of has that same wide-eyed wonder he had in Force Awakens, where he's like, "We'll use the Force." He's like,
Right.
maybe we just all have it, and maybe everyone does, because that's something that JJ had talked a lot about going into the Force
Right.
Awakens, is this idea that everybody has the Force. But yeah, you would.
Poe Dameron, Jedi Warrior.
It's true. I have that shirt. I still love it. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if Finn was also on the Ace Arrow spectrum. I don't know that we have evidence to support that he is, but I wouldn't be surprised if he was.
I mean, but I read Jana as being there as a character to affirm Finn's journey.
Yeah.
And I read Zori as being there as a character to show that Poe has a complicated past.
Yeah.
Like I don't think you need like I don't need more justification for why. I mean, I definitely want those stories of Poe Dameron, Spice Runner.
Yeah,
now,
for sure.
but
And
like I want that now.
And I want to know
But
what happens. What I really liked about Jana and the others being stormtroopers is there were rumors for a long time that Finn was going to lead this stormtrooper rebellion. And it's kind of ironic because even though I've been screaming from the hilltops like about Finn getting more story, I never really wanted him to lead a stormtrooper rebellion because I personally didn't feel like we were really primed for that. I don't think we were primed for Finn running into a battlefield and turning like a whole platoon against another platoon. But I did like the idea of Finn getting to be with other stormtroopers. And so what I liked Jana and company being that, because then Finn could find this community. He could find these other people who are like him, but in a way that felt more natural than, hey guys, I'm on the battlefield. I'm this random guy that used to mop your floors. Do you want to follow me to the Resistance? Which I never saw happening.
Right. I mean, especially given that there's probably about to be a lot of ex stormtroopers.
Right.
Like,
For sure.
Like there's a group of them now who are like, oh no, we rejected this. It's not like we're not stormtroopers anymore because the First Order isn't a thing.
Right. Exactly.
But speaking of that, what about we can talk for a minute? One of the things we predicted that I guess didn't really come to full fruition was that there was going to be a splinter in the First Order.
Yeah.
But what we did get was General Hux, first resistance spy. So what did you think about that?
I was really happy with that. I didn't pick up on it as soon as I should, but my brain was just trying so hard to keep up with everything that was going on in that movie. I wasn't trying to solve that mystery before it happened.
I remember I was sitting in the theater, and when they were in the conference room scene, and I don't know the exact line, but Kylo says something to the effect of,
"Do you like my hat?"
I sense something going on in here.
Yeah.
I looked at my wife and I said, I bet Hux is the resistance spy. And she looked at me and said, I don't know what you're talking about because I'm not obsessed with this like you are. But I knew that was when I first saw it. And then like right before he shot those stormtroopers, I was like bouncing in my seat. I'm like, watch, it's about to happen. And then it did. And I was really excited about that.
I remember thinking that line was weird because Kylo's like, I sense some apprehension about my appearance or something like that. And then everyone looks at Hux, and I'm like, why does anyone care if Hux is worried about the mask? Like, this is just a weird. Like, I liked it because it showed like their weird, that showed their weird dynamic and their awkward dynamic. But that was just funny. And then he had to be like, oh no, sir, I like your mask. Okay.
But I did like too, because one of the things we've always said about Hux is that he was the ideologue.
Yep.
That Kylo was not into the First Order for that type of like neo-fascism or whatever it counts as.
Right.
But so when Hux is spying for the Resistance, feeding them intel, it's not because he's had a change of heart. It's because he hates Kylo Ren.
Right.
And he's like, I'm not doing this so that you will win. I'm doing this so that he will lose. And I thought that was a good place for his character to go to.
Well, I also like it because we've hit a point where Kylo is now serving under Palpatine. We were kind of discussing Palpatine's plan earlier. According to Kylo, if we assume that he never lies to Rey, he never had the intention of serving Palpatine to the point where he was going to kill Rey. That his plan was to use Palpatine's resources to rule and find Rey and turn Rey to the dark side so they could both take out Palpatine. But I think at this point he is serving Palpatine, does like having a dark side master, even though he claimed he wanted to get rid of the Sith. I don't think this is as much of a turnaround as people say it is. And the reason why I don't feel like it's as much of a turnaround is because his motivation is to serve Palpatine long enough to turn Rey to the dark side.
Right.
Like, I don't think that Kylo was ever not going to kill Palpatine. He just decided it's more beneficial to wait to kill Palpatine. Right. And so I don't think that that's as much of a backtrack in the film as some were saying. But I like that as he's doing this, Kylo is kind of becoming more of an ideologue, but not for neo-fascism and all of this, but for dark side stuff. Like we know he's through Resistance and other things. We know he's looking for artifacts. He's doing all of this stuff, and that's probably disturbing Hux. So Hux now is the ideologue, but for the wrong ideology. So he wants to get rid of Kylo. Hey, Metu, welcome. So I think Hux wants to get rid of Kylo so that he can go back to the ideology he already likes. I don't think he necessarily wants. Like, in his perfect world, the Resistance wins just enough that Kylo gets removed from his position and Hux gets put into power, and then Hux beats the Resistance. I think that's Hux's perfect world.
I think so, too. I will also say, though, since you brought it up, that one of the things I like about that moment with Kylo telling Rey, hey, I don't plan on killing you. I'm just in this so that we can both kill the Emperor after I turn you. I like that because that is exactly Vader's plan.
Oh, 100.
When he confronts Luke.
100. Yep.
He's like, Luke, come with me. Dark side's pretty cool. We'll go kill Palpatine, and then we'll rule the galaxy together.
Yep.
And like that's the exact same thing. And it ends in the same place too. Vader sacrifices himself and is redeemed to save Luke.
Yep.
And even though his redemption comes first, Kylo sacrifices himself, for Rey's sake.
Right.
And in the end, and I don't know. There's so many parallels in this that, like, I just.
Well, and I like that too.
Openly wept several times.
And like bringing that up, how that really was Vader's plan. I mean, then it makes sense.
Take a seat. I'll be right with you.
That's a subscriber. We have those buttons now. Thank you for subscribing. I knew I had ones that weren't Lando. I am really bad at Streamlabs, but we're working on it.
I'm definitely glad for that because
that was Dex. I added Dex just for you like 2 years ago when we started this, and I couldn't figure out how to make the bot work. Anyway, I was saying, I really liked what you were saying about how Kylo's plan was the same, because Palpatine figures out what's going on. There's that point where Kylo's literally just standing in the hallway looking at a wall, and Palpatine's talking to him like, you're gonna betray me, and he's like, super not, bro, and he walks away. And I love this idea that Kylo just goes places and like stares at walls when he's talking to Palpatine. Like, if you think of the stormtroopers from Force Awakens, and they're mad because he's just like killing computers for no reason. Now it's like, oh, he's standing talking to the wall again. What's he doing? Oh my, like, how often does he do this? Like, does Palpatine just make him stand in the corner when he doesn't follow the dark side correctly? Like, what's going on? But anyway, Palpatine's like, yo, you're not gonna do the thing we talked about. And Kylo's like, I'm super gonna do the thing we talked about. And I think at that point is when Palpatine goes, nope, I gotta convert Rey, because I've already lost him. Like, I think he's aware. He's like, I'm not gonna fall for this again. I'm not gonna let another dumb Skywalker take care of me. Like, I'm now centered on Rey. And this was something I was kind of talking about earlier, and I lost my train of thought. Why does Palpatine spend time on Ben instead of Rey? Why doesn't he go after his own granddaughter? I think 2 reasons. One, the only thing about anything Reylo that still remains mildly uncomfortable for me is, like, they're 10 years apart. Which, at their age, is not bad, but is not, anyway, I don't want to be judgmental to anybody who might be in the situation in the chat, but, like, it's still a little weird to me. So Palpatine was presumably working on Ben for 10 years before he had a granddaughter. So, he already has that groundwork in. And then you have Rey born, and however long it took for him to realize he had a granddaughter, maybe it was right away, maybe it was a while. But Kylo says in the movie that Palpatine had a vision of Rey sitting on the throne instead of Palpatine. So I think he's like, nope, I'm going to focus on Ben Solo because my granddaughter's going to kill me. And I think that's why he doesn't work on turning Rey to the dark side. I think it really is that he had just had 2 years plus gestation, or 10 years plus gestation on working on Ben.
Right. Well, and I think too, to the extent that Palpatine was, the puppet master behind Snoke, Snoke knew that Ben was being tempted by the light.
Right.
And Palpatine would have known, all right, well, like you said, I've tried that, and if this is still a thing that I've got to deal with, then maybe it's a better plan to put all my chips behind Rey anyway.
Right. Well, and I think that's when he makes his plan. Okay, if Rey's gonna kill me, I'll make her killing me the plan. And then he sets up. Hello, Noel, welcome. I think he makes it the plan. Like, I'm gonna tune my mystery box that's attached to my shoulders, so that if she kills me in hatred, I will have the ability to possess her body. And I think that kind of goes back to what I was saying before, of like, you can, like, maybe he has this ability to attach his soul into a certain place, and because of where he is, if his body dies, he can temporarily, like, detach and then possess Rey because she would be killing him in hatred.
Right.
And I think that's kind of, again, I feel like Palpatine's plan is very convoluted and twisty and turny, but I also feel like it makes sense.
Right. One of the things that chat was talking about a few minutes ago that we can talk about next. So Calamari says, perhaps you've noticed it, but Ben was impaled in the same place that he impales Han, and we talked about Dale said he stabs him with his own saber.
Yep.
Why don't we talk about that moment and then also talk about the Han Solo scene?
Yes, let's. So
more of the moments where I openly wept in this film.
I mean, before we get to that, let's talk about Rey's moment right before that. Her cave scene. So this is after the stuff on the First Order ship. Kylo has told her she's a Palpatine. She now wants to go and stop Palpatine, and her motivation is less like, I need to go find my grandfather, and more, I need to go find the man responsible for my parents' death. I think it's so interesting that she has this mental disconnect, that she never can bring herself to consider Palpatine her grandfather through the whole film, even though she's so attached to her parents. And so she goes to the Death Star ruins, which is just fascinating in of itself. And she finds the other Wayfinder, which, if the Wayfinder's in the Death Star, that must mean Palpatine had a way to get to Exegol in Return of the Jedi. Like, again, he had this whole plan all ready to go if there was a Wayfinder there. And she meets herself, and this was a really cool, I mean, this was very much the cave scene on Dagobah, only, like, it's not 1980 and you can actually have a fight. And she's literally fighting herself, and she is literally who she is most afraid of. And I love that. I love that her greatest fear is herself. That's what she tells Luke a little bit later in the movie. That, if you look at her in the whole, like, Force Awakens is all about, can I leave Jakku? Can I go out and do this bigger story? It's about her going from, I need to get back to Jakku, to, my belongings ahead of me, and I need to go find Luke Skywalker, and like the freedom to pick up and move. And then Last Jedi is about I don't have to be anybody. But then, you know, she was always most afraid of being stuck on Jakku because she could, you know, she would never find herself. Like, she's still afraid of herself. She's afraid of never finding herself if she leaves Jakku. Last Jedi, she's afraid of her being nothing if she doesn't have a family. And then finally in Last Jedi, her greatest fear is herself. And that's when she finds out that she's a descendant of Palpatine. So she's freaking out. She fights herself. She goes out, and like Kylo literally shows up, like, "Hey, let's have a chat." Like, he doesn't walk in with, like, he's not necessarily looking for a fight. He's literally like, "Okay, look, the last time I tried to talk to you didn't go well," and she's like,
Yep.
"Nope, I'm gonna fight you. I'm so mad at you. Let's just go." And she is like on this dark channel, right? She is just so mad, and it's like everything that was in her is bubbling up. And that's when she starts fighting, to the point, and I don't want to not talk about Leia, but I'll get even more sidetracked if I bring in Leia now. But Leia does what Leia does and snaps them both out of it. And I really truly believe, even though Leia says Ben and only says Ben, I think she's doing what she's doing for Rey as much as she's doing it for Ben.
Oh, I think so too.
And Leia's sacrifice is the breach. Because I mean, Kylo literally just said, "You can't go back to my mother for the same reason I can't go back to my mother." But then his mother reaches out. It's almost like when he said that out loud, it put it out into the Force what his greatest fear is not being able to go back to his mother. And then that's when Leia knows, oh, if I go to my son, that's what's going to do it. And then she sacrifices herself. And I think I'm getting way off the point, so I'll let you talk now. But like that's kind of how I read everything up to that point.
I will say about the dark Rey scene. One, I thought that's what that was going to be, was some sort of vision.
I agree.
And I really liked the way it was done. I like the idea that Empress Rey Palpatine would have sat on the throne and like filed her teeth to get that that look. But I really liked that scene. And I liked the way that Ben, kind of comes to her, there in the throne room, which we had seen, in some of the footage somewhere.
Yep.
And I liked that was not the confrontation in front of Palpatine, because that's what I thought that was going to be. And so I liked that was just him coming to her saying, "Okay, let's have a conversation." I will say that when I first saw him there, by that point, I wondered if he was actually there or if this was another Force Skype moment.
Right.
Which I want to talk more about at some point too. Yes. So just add that to the list of things.
Yeah, this is going to be a long project, this movie.
But I really liked the way all of that went down. All the way through. Leia redeeming him through that, and I think that there's a lot about that I want to talk about. A lot about Leia altogether. I want to talk about.
We could almost just do a Leia stream, to be frank.
Oh yeah, sure. I'm down with that. But I really liked. I liked the symbolism of like who I don't remember. I just said it a minute ago. Who in the chat had talked about Rey stabbing her in the same place that he stabbed Han. But I also liked. I mean, one, I was glad that the film showed us that Rey has Baby Yoda healing powers.
Yes.
Ahead of time with the snake. Like I was glad that we got an explanation for that ahead of time.
Yep.
But I think that moment almost had to happen because I feel like that's what shocks Rey into seeing the path that she was going down, as much as what happens with Dark Rey in the vault.
Yep.
When she sees, oh no, I just I've murdered Ben.
Right.
The same way that he murdered Han. I have to save him now. And I even like I was probably so annoying to the people in the theaters, not just because of the open sobs for most of this film. But when right after she stabs him, when she's kind of holding him, like I yelled out, "Heal him!" Because I was like, we saw you do it. Like, make the connection. Do this right now. Because I really feel like that's the moment where a lot of this snaps in place for her. Because like she sees, oh no, I've just killed this person.
Right.
Like that's where this line of thinking takes me, and I can't do that anymore.
Right.
And that's why she leaves and she goes to Octo and she's like, nope, all
Nope.
right, exile mode. Like this is what Jedis do, right?
That
When
was the
things go
most,
wrong.
her running to Octo and setting the ship on fire was the most beautifully Rey moment I had ever seen in my life. Like, I just wanted to giggle because it was the most Rey thing I had ever seen. Like, nope, I'm gonna go do what Master Skywalker did. You can't stop me from being Master Skywalker.
I mean, but that's such a Jedi move though, because like not only like that's what Yoda did too. They're like,
Yep.
well, this went bad, this broke bad for us, so now we'll go hide out over here by ourselves.
But what I was gonna say is, I think too, like it wasn't just that Rey stabbed Kylo. I think it wasn't that Rey stabbed Kylo. It's that Rey stabbed Ben. Like,
yeah,
I really believe that the moment that Ben paused and he heard his mother's voice, like that was the switch flip. And maybe not maybe not everything was done, but like that was where he kind of hit. And I think Rey stabbed him and then realized he wasn't fighting back anymore, that he had stopped fighting, and so she literally had just stabbed him, you know, when he was no longer a danger, and that's what freaked her out. Where if it was 30 seconds before and Leia was too late and Rey stabs him, I don't think it has the same impact.
Yeah. Andy said, I heard healing is common in the EU. Is that healing dark because you're imposing your will on another's body, or light because you're healing someone? Or do both Jedi and Sith do it? I would think it's more of a Jedi power than a Sith power, honestly. But I don't know what stuff in EU Legends might be a thing.
I mean, the movie isn't too far off from what we see in KOTOR, to be honest. Like, if you look, the light side healing power in KOTOR is you can heal someone else, or like you can heal yourself, and the dark side healing power is you suck life force from somebody else. Yeah. And so, like, Palpatine drains them, and that's how he heals. But Rey, when Rey heals the snake, she literally says, I'm giving some of my life force to the snake, and that's how he's able to heal. Which, I realized this because I watched The Last Jedi over the weekend. Rey calls Kylo a murderous snake in The Last Jedi, and the first thing she actually heals in The Rise of Skywalker is a snake that was going to murder them. So I really liked that. For those of you who think The Rise of Skywalker ignored The Last Jedi.
Which I'll also tell you about the healing too. I think it was you that pointed this out to me, that when Rey heals him, that she heals the scar too. Yep. That like that's gone at that point too. I didn't even notice that at the time.
I had that pointed out to me as well, and I can't remember who pointed it out to me. But yeah, I think that's, and I like to say that is because she's the one who scarred his face. She's the one who slices it. So I like to see that too as like a visual representation of her own forgiveness of him.
Right.
But
I will also say about the healing power, I don't know that it would work on yourself the same way. Mm-hmm. Like I feel like that feels like too much of a video game thing, but I like that it gives you an opportunity to heal others. I mean, I could be wrong about that, but
yeah, no, I think that's right too. And what I like about the setup with the life force too is it specifically says Rey. She specifically says, I'm giving some of my life force to the snake. And to spoil the Mandalorian for some people, but it's not, I mean, it kind of is a big spoiler, but like this week we saw Baby Yoda use the healing power, and he has to like squat down because he's like tired because he just did it. But I mean, he's just a little baby. He doesn't have a whole lot of, I mean, he's pretty cute, so he's got a lot of life force, but he doesn't have that much life force. So, you know, he gets tired when you save someone's life because he's just a cute little baby Yoda. And
the change in your voice right there was just everything.
When I talk about my son, yes, I know, my little baby Yoda. But I see our friend Bare Naked Gaming is in the chat, and I really hope he's got it on mute because I'm about to spoil the movie for him, but that's okay. But I think that kind of comes up with another thing towards the end of the movie, because you got the, like, people have made a point of, like, why can't they just do, like, the infinite bring each other back to life thing forever at the end of the movie? Like, why does Ben die? And I think, to jump ahead to the end, I think my reading of it, one, is Rey has the healing power. We don't technically know that Ben has the healing power. We know he can heal Rey, but they also share a bond, and so it's possible that he can heal her because they have a bond, and not because he could then heal Finn or Poe or a snake or something like that.
Right.
And I think the other thing to keep in mind, I think the other thing to keep in mind is Palpatine had just drained them. So like if you think of your body as like a battery and it has energy, like you will make more energy throughout your lifetime, but you only have a certain amount in any given moment. Palpatine has just drained both of them. They are both very low on life force. Rey defeats Palpatine because of the help of all of the Jedi, not necessarily because of her own life force. And so I think Ben literally gives what he has left to Rey, and that's why he dies. And I have other thematic reasons for, as much as I love Ben Solo, and the first time I saw the movie, I was screaming, "Don't you dare do it!" as he was fading away. So like, I'm not saying like I'm super happy he died, but like, I have other thematic reasons for appreciating what he did. But that it gets off topic. But like,
I will say though, I'll be disappointed if the how it should have ended doesn't just have them going back and forth and healing each other.
I will be disappointed if it's not like Palpatine going, "I have a granddaughter. I have a granddaughter. Did you know that I have a granddaughter?"
Oh, that's perfect. But to backtrack a little bit, to take us back to the moment at the Death Star.
Yeah.
What were your thoughts about the Han scene?
I'm really happy he's not a Force ghost.
Me too. Yeah.
Because that was my worry. Because I'd seen some of that scuttlebutt on the internet. It was one of those rumors that was floating around for a while that Harrison would be back. Which I never looked into enough to know if they were true or not. But I was worried because even though you and I have speculated before that Han might be Force sensitive, there's a difference between being like kind of you can touch the Force in the way that every living being could, and maybe some have more luck, and like being able to be a Force ghost. Because it's still not every Jedi. Like we were able to hear Jedi voices for Rey, but I don't think all the Jedi we heard could necessarily be Force ghosts. Maybe they could, but I don't think we necessarily know that. So I was worried about Han coming back and being a Force ghost because that just has so many implications. Because then suddenly everybody could be a ghost, and that's just a little bit too much for me. But I liked that they said like Kylo's like you're a memory, and Han says I'm your memory, and I thought that worked really well.
Yeah.
And if you've watched my spoiler review, I did. Why am I speaking like a sailor? I didn't think I was cursing. Was I cursing without realizing it?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. Maybe words have meanings that I don't understand. But I like Han showing up. And if you watch my spoiler review, I talk about this more about how there's this idea. I like that Kylo had to go back through like his worst, most intimate sin. Like, yeah, he killed villages and very arguably killing 50 or 100 people is worse than killing one person. But killing his father is his most intimate sin. And to have to walk that sin back and like forgive himself for what he went through and to accept that his father would forgive him. And oh my gosh, like I know this movie had so many like on the nose nostalgia callbacks that scuttlebutt, I gotcha. Nostalgia callbacks that you can like or not like, but like when Ben was just like dad and then Han just goes I know, I melted. I was like that was the best possible use of that callback I had ever seen.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Well, and I think I love that movement, that part of the film for that reason. And I was again just weeping. And I loved that the dialogue, was the exact same, and that the blocking was the exact same. Like it worked. I mean, it makes sense if it was a memory that it would be the exact same. But it was so important, I think, to show that, and to go along with what Leia did for him in helping him find redemption.
Yeah.
Like I think it shows that it wasn't just what Leia did. Like he also had to have a moment for himself there.
Yep.
Yeah, and like to figure that out for himself. And I feel like I loved it too because this literally shows us how it could have gone in The Force Awakens.
Right.
And I think it shows us how easily it could have gone that way in The Force Awakens. And we talked about that when we talked about The Force Awakens, but to bring up Dark Rendezvous again,
Always
you know,
to go. It's
you know,
fine.
Yoda goes to Dooku and says, "Come home, please come home."
Yep.
And I feel like that's what this was. And finally, someone comes home.
Yeah.
Finally, someone says, "Okay, I'll take
home.
you up on that." Like, yes, I want that. And Han says, "I've forgiven you, and your mother's forgiven you." Like, it's like we're good. Like be our son again. Like, that's all we've ever wanted was for you to come home and be our son. And the I know was just the the cherry on the top of that, because like you're right, it couldn't have been more perfect than that for me. But I feel like that was one of the most moving scenes for like nostalgia's sake, but I think it's one of the most important things too for the story of Ben Solo.
Yep.
Because I think he has to have that moment. I mean, because Rey just left him. Like if Rey is his source of redemption, Rey just Rey just took off. And like if that's like, and if Leia is the source of his redemption,
freaking love
he's
Rey.
not going to get that moment with Leia now.
Right.
And so like, I love that about Rey too.
I love Rey.
Just books it. But like it's so important that he have that moment, because I think without that moment, he doesn't go to Exegol.
Right.
Without that moment, the rest of the film doesn't play out the way it does.
I agree. Yep. Well, and I to bring in Leia a little bit here in this scene, because I really think it is both of the parents' actions here.
I think so too.
I think what happens with Leia is I think she knows that this is a critical point. Like, she knows Palpatine's back. She, even if she doesn't know that Palpatine was necessarily behind Snoke to whatever degree, like, I think she has some awareness, but, I think she's like, okay, I gotta be like, this is it. Like, Palpatine's here. He's gonna try to take my son, and then there's just really no chance for my son ever again. And maybe she had gotten some more hope for Ben after seeing Luke at the end of The Last Jedi, after spending time with Rey over that year. And we really haven't talked about it, but I love Jedi Master Leia Organa Solo so much.
Me too.
When Rey calls her master, I just like, oh. And we've never gotten, no one's talking about that. We've not seen on screen a woman training a woman like that, other than like Barriss Offee and Luminara and Dewey. They're like the only one I can think of off the top of my head. It's so rare to see that, and to see it with these two, anyway, I loved that. But I think that some of that can be what happened with Leia, and I think Leia knows that this is it. Like, it's now or never. And I think that Kylo's saying, you can't go back to my mother the same way I can. Now, I don't get why Rey can't go back to Leia at that point, because thinking back on it now, the only bad thing she had done is kill Chewie, and she knew she didn't kill Chewie anymore. So I don't know why Ben thinks that, or Kylo thinks that, but maybe he's just being hopeful. I don't know. But he's like, I can't go back to my mother. And I think him speaking that aloud, maybe he had never spoken that aloud before, like let that thought out into the ether. And maybe in some way Leia knew that and went, that's what he's waiting for. He's waiting for that it's okay to come home. Leia is already, Resistance Reborn says that Leia never really fully recouped from almost dying in space. So Leia's already weaker anyway. It's very possible that she could be feeling weak under like a dark oppression from Palpatine being back. And I think that Kylo has shielded himself so that his mother can't reach out to him. So I think that the power that it would take for Leia to get to her is what weakens her and causes her to die, and Ben senses that. And that's what breaks it. But there's this duality to redemption and forgiveness and all of this. Because I've said before, if you earn redemption, it's not redemption. If you earn forgiveness, it's not forgiveness. Like, I can commit, and I say this in my redemption videos, I can commit a crime and get sentenced to 100 hours community service. I can do that 100 hours of community service, and that's atonement but that doesn't mean I've changed in my heart at all. Even though I have done the thing to make the thing right, that doesn't mean I'm a different person. The two really have to go hand in hand. So Leia sending this act of love that covers Kylo, that covers over everything he's done, and said,
Right.
I love you anyway, to the point that I'm going to die that you know that I love you. And to Rey to say, I accept you in this moment, I think snaps them out of it. But he still has to accept it, and Rey still has to accept it. Ben Solo has to accept that he's been forgiven by his parents, which is difficult, because that means he has to admit he could still be lovable. And that's a huge hurdle, and that's what he's going through with his father.
Well, and to Leia too. So a couple people said that part of the reason she couldn't go to Leia was because she was a Palpatine. And Kylo may not have known this, but that's why I think it's so important that Luke tells us Leia did know.
Yeah.
Like Leia probably knew before Luke did.
I think
like
she did.
Leia probably knew all along, like from the first moment she sees Rey.
Yeah.
Like I think Leia probably knows, and I think it says a lot about Leia that she's like, okay, it doesn't matter,
and sends her to Luke.
Yeah. And I think it says a lot too that, you know, we learn now that Leia sets aside her own Jedi training because of the vision she has, and she sees Rey as the fulfillment of that. Like I think that's a part of this that's getting overlooked in the conversations too.
Yep.
Is that Luke says, you know, Leia had a vision that she was going to make this worse for her son if she kept pursuing this, and so she set aside her own Force powers.
Yeah.
And she says, and that's why Luke took the saber.
Yep.
You know, that he gives her back at the end, because she says, you know, Leia said, I can't do this. Hold this for the person that can.
Yep.
And that person is Rey. I think that's so important.
I think too, I was thinking about that today. I posted something about this in our Discord, in our Rise of Skywalker room, that, you know, it's very normal. It's like very Star Wars to have somebody have a vision like what Leia has, and then to kind of like completely misinterpret it. And I agree with everything you just said, and I think that Leia is correct that she leaves that lightsaber that helps Rey feel better. But what I like to think of it as is, you get to the end of the movie, and when Ben passes, I remember thinking it was weird that Leia didn't become one with the Force until Ben passes and they become one with the Force together, that she was waiting for him. And now I don't really know what her full vision is. We might get a better idea from that in the novelization or in another book that would come out. But I like to think that Ben, she was afraid for Ben, and she saw that at the path of which I become a Jedi, he falls to the dark side. But really, the path of which Ben becomes a Jedi again, that he comes back from the dark side, that's when she gives herself. Like, that is such a final Jedi test. And to me, Leia truly becomes a Jedi when she gives her life for her son. And so that vision does still become true, that, like, all of this stuff that's happening with Ben does happen at the end of her Jedi path. It's not because she goes down the Jedi path that things happen with Ben. It's that because things happen with Ben, and she can accept them and say, my son is going to take this journey, but I'm going to trust him to come back, and I'm going to wait for him, and I'm going to go with him, and I'm going to let go and let him make his choices. That's when she becomes a Jedi.
Right. Well, and one of the things I think about Leia training Rey too, one, I love that Rey has, like, I can't get over the academic in me that's glad that she did the reading. That she actually read all those books that she took, and I'm glad that we see those come up again. I would have been sad if they didn't.
Yeah.
But and I've not seen The Last Jedi again since I saw Rise of Skywalker. I know you have.
Yeah.
But it gives new meaning to me too when Yoda tells Luke in The Last Jedi, Rey has everything she needs.
Right.
Because we think in that moment that that's a line about those books.
Right.
But Yoda can know that that's also about Leia.
Yep.
Yoda can tell Luke, you know, no, she doesn't need you anymore. Like, she's learned what she needs from you. So you do what you have to do in this movie, because there's another Skywalker. Like all along, you know, if we take Fact-Pov at face value, all along, you know, Leia was the one that Yoda wanted, and I like that Leia was the one that saw it through to the end.
Right.
That Leia was the one that trained Rey, and I feel like when Yoda tells Luke that it's about the books, but it's also about no. Don't forget, there's still another Skywalker. Like there's
Right.
still another person. Rey has what she needs in these books. It's gonna, show her some potential world between world stuff if the visual dictionary is in any
Right.
indication. But also she's still got Leia, and
Yep.
and I think that's such a power, and that's like I feel like you can't watch this film and not feel the limitations of what they could do
Yeah.
with Leia in this. And I'll forever think about what it would have been like if we hadn't lost Carrie,
Right.
because this was supposed to be Carrie's film.
Right.
Like this was supposed to be the one, and I want to know like what Master Leia would have been like in a film where that could have happened.
Right.
But I feel like Leia's use in this film is so crucial,
right.
and that they were able to get that in this film given the constraints that they had.
Right.
I think really is a credit to the people that made made the film.
I completely agree. Cal, what is the cut portion of Force Collector? Like I've read most of Force Collector, but I didn't realize there was a portion cut from the book. So I can't answer the question.
I don't know either. I do think for the quick comment in the chat, I do think that's the medal that Chewie gets. Is at least I'm assuming it is. It's Luke's, the one that Maz has in Force Collector. That she gives to Chewie at the end. Because we know Chewie gave his away.
Yeah. Oh, there's so much. So I still want to talk about the world between world stuff. That's our own kind of pet theory. But as long as we're kind of talking. Oh, I lost Django again. Hold on. He'll probably come right back. This happens sometimes. 1 second. How are we doing out there in the chat? Oh, he's coming back. It's all fine. Hey.
Hi. Sorry.
Did you pop into the world between worlds for a second there when I mentioned it?
I did. I thought I would just hop over and see what was going on.
Check on it, see what was going on.
So it's definitely there.
It's
so,
definitely there.
So, we're good to go.
But yeah, so I definitely want to talk about that, but I almost want to kind of continue this line, since we just talked about Ben. Let's talk a little bit more about Octo. So I love that Rey literally is just like, okay, I just stabbed the boy I like after his mother, who's also my teacher, died, to say, hey, don't stab the boy you like. And then I healed him, and he felt different because he looked like, oh, by the way, okay, I gotta gush. I gotta gush for a second. So first of all, when they talked earlier, and he was all like, I offered you my hand and you wanted to take it, why didn't you? And then later she's like, I wanted to take your hand, Ben's hand. I was like, anyway, had to emote about that moment for a second. But then she just literally just like gets in the ship, runs off, sets it on fire, and Luke is like, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing here? Why are you back? He clearly had I haven't showered in a week hair, because I don't know what was going on with Luke's hair in that scene. It was driving me nuts. But what as I know you're somebody who loves The Last Jedi, isn't the biggest fan of the saber toss. How did you feel about the saber catch in this movie?
I mean, I was not surprised that it happened. Like when she threw the saber, I was anticipating that Luke would catch it. But to me, I like it better. Like I feel like the next time I watch The Last Jedi, it will bother me less knowing that the saber catch happens in Rise of Skywalker. I really liked that moment altogether. I think it's important, speaking of saber tosses, that Kylo throws his away.
Yeah, I was gonna ask about that too.
At the Death Star too. I liked that moment, but no, I really liked that Luke catches it. I also, if we're talking about the Octo scene, I really like that Luke says, you realize I was wrong, right?
Yeah. Like, did you get the point of the last movie?
Well, but see, this is the thing. One, I think that's a line for us because, and I think a lot of people are.
Oh, he's frozen.
Retconning.
Hold on. My internet took a hit.
Okay.
Let me make sure. Yes, we're good now. Okay, go ahead.
But I think a lot of people look at that line and like, oh no, here's JJ saying, look how terrible The Last Jedi was. And I don't think that's what that is.
Right.
But as far as we know, Rey hasn't spoken to Luke since she left Octo.
Right.
And Luke was not on board at the time.
This is
And
true.
so, like, this is the first time that Luke has told her, oh no, I was wrong.
Right.
Like isolating yourself is not the answer here.
Mm-hmm.
But no, I really like that scene, and I like that Luke kind of sends her back on his way. I was again, I can't even tell you how many points I cried at this film. But when Yoda's theme plays and Luke raises the X-wing, I really love that. I don't know, the whole Octo scene worked for me. Again, I was curious whether or not they filmed that on location.
Yeah.
Again, because
Did
I
they
feel
go
like
back
that would have been a thing that was hard to keep.
hide?
Just like I wonder if they filmed the stuff on location on Tatooine at the end, because I feel like if people had gone back to Tunisia again, we would have known that.
They could have filmed that in the Jordan where they were for Pisana.
Yeah, right. But no, I really liked the Octo scene a lot.
Yeah, I did too. And yeah, I feel like people really want there to be this competition between like J.J. Abrams and Rian Johnson. Like they really want.
Yeah, I don't think that's a thing at all. Though.
I don't think it exists. I think that Rian Johnson would have made a very different episode 9 in the same way J.J. Abrams would have made a very different episode 8, and that's the end of it. Like I don't think they would do so to spite each other. I think they're polar opposite filmmakers. They're both. I hear a lot of people saying like J.J. Abrams, he just makes like entertainment movies and makes popcorn. I love J.J. Abrams, and J.J. Abrams has an emotional intelligence that he does not get credit for. That is the way that he understands character relationships. It's just very different than Rian Johnson, who is also very good at things. And any kind of dissonance within the sequel trilogy, I think it's just because you have two directors who also wrote their scripts with drastically different styles. Like, I don't think the movies are as counter to each other as people think they are. It's just the filmmaking styles that are different. I think the internal information is the same.
Also, Dale says in chat, Luke catching the saber is showing how much influence Sidious had on the Jedi as a whole. He had a hold on Luke as well, and that's why he'd not even thought about killing Ben. I think that might be true to an extent. Luke definitely, he says something to Rey about Sidious, which I think is really ironic now, given that he was talking about her granddad, and neither one of them knew it at the time. I think.
I think so too, because that's something people have talked about. It's my theory, and I don't think this has been confirmed anywhere yet. Luke is cut off from the Force. That's not a theory. That's stated in The Last Jedi. Rey, the first time she meditates in the Force, says, "I didn't see you. You've cut yourself off from the Force." I think that's why the first time Rey and Kylo Force Skype and Luke walks out, like literally Kylo says Luke, like he can hear Luke or see Luke or something, but Luke has no idea this is going on. And I think that's because Luke has cut himself off from the Force. Luke reaches out into the Force and connects with Leia, which is what helps snap her out of her coma. And it's at this point that Rey has the third Force Skype, which is the infamous Swallow Force Skype. Then she goes down the dark side toilet and has her cave vision, and then it is the hand touch, the fourth Force Skype. I think Luke is aware of Rey as soon as he reconnects to the Force, and that's why when she goes into the dark side, when the granddaughter of Palpatine goes into the dark side cave, I think Luke goes, "Oh shoot, something's going on here." And then that's when he runs. And when they're having the hand touch, I think we always took it as, and it's hard to say what evidence is or isn't, because obviously Rian Johnson was not making episode 8 with 9 in mind. But it's easy to look at that and say, well, Luke can see the vision now because they're closer now, so they're more intense now, so you can see Kylo now. And I don't take it that way anymore. I think Luke is aware of the Force, so he can see the Force Skyping. But he gets so mad, and it comes off as angry dad who caught his daughter sneaking out of the house to go to go hang out with the boy. But I think it's also him going, "What the frick? There's a Palpatine on my island. what are you doing? Like, what is going on? And so wouldn't you know it, Luke Skywalker panics, such as we've never seen him do in any movie. And that's why he wants her to go away. And that's why he doesn't really want to follow her. He doesn't want to follow a Palpatine to go see his fallen Darth Vader worshipping nephew before a puppet of Palpatine. He's like, nope. I'm yeeting out of this situation, and you can leave. And then he has to think for a second.
It means a lot more when Luke tells her, this is not going to go how you think.
Yeah. Yeah, he's like, honey.
If he sees the whole picture then too.
Yep.
But no, I really like all of that a lot. I'll also say before we move on a little bit, just about the symbolism of catching and tossing and pulling sabers to you. I loved that Luke confronts Palpatine by throwing his saber away, and Rey confronts Palpatine by pulling it to her, and it's the same saber.
It's the same saber, and really a similar point.
Yeah, no, I just love, like, I can't help but think that a lot of this is intentional, but whether or not it is, I love that there are so many sort of symbolic parallels.
Yep.
Whether it's the George poetry kind of thing.
Yeah, it's like poetry. It rhymes.
But I loved that point too.
No, I did, and even then, I loved so much of Palpatine's plan at the end, because at the end he's really got Rey in a trap, because Rey has now brought the entire Resistance with her, such as it is, and they're getting wrecked, and she wants to kill Palpatine. He's like, all right, look, your people are all gonna die, and you can kill me, but guess what? If you kill me, I'm just gonna possess your body. So, fun fact, give in to your hate and kill me, because that's actually exactly what you want to do. Because I've decided that if this is what's gonna happen, then I'm just gonna make it work for me. So, good luck. And then Rey is like, what the frick do I do? And then that's when Ben shows up and puts a kink in the plan. But I love Palpatine there too. Oh,
I was gonna say again, that's a parallel to Jedi though, because like Palpatine shows, look, your fleet's getting destroyed because it's a trap, and he shows Rey the exact same thing in that moment too.
Yep. And I like Palpatine is just his sassy self, because he's like, you know what? The last movie ended with a Skywalker tossing me down a pit, so I'm gonna toss a Skywalker down a pit. And he's like, he's like making an awareness. Like, this is a reference, and I'm telling you it's a reference because I'm still mad about being thrown down that pit, dang it. I haven't let it go in 3 decades. I've been thinking about it, so just throwing you there.
I did think it was funny though. Like I didn't think that was going to be the last we saw of Ben. Like I was expecting him to climb back out or something. But like when we see the hand climbing up out of the pit, like I know it's not intentional.
Yeah.
But my point, the way I read that was, all right, old man, why didn't you just climb out? Like if climbing was an option, why did you die? Just climb out. Oh, don't get so pissed off about it.
Yeah.
Just Oh, but no, I love a lot of those parallels there.
I like.
I still feel like we have barely scratched the surface of all this,
and we've been going. Jay makes a good point. It's very Shakespearean with the conflict between the two houses.
I even told you it was Romeo and Juliet, but better.
Yeah, I was like, it's Romeo and Juliet, only they're not stupid.
Yeah.
Because like in Romeo and Juliet, they're like, someone's dead, so I'm just gonna die because I can't handle it. And this one, they're like, I'm gonna undead them because I love them. And like, that's the difference right there. If it were Palps, I wouldn't let it go for me. That's true. I mean, that's true. I wouldn't let it go either if I was Palpatine.
I will also say, since we're talking about Palpatine again, I like the assertion that Palpatine was at least in the shadows behind everything for the whole sequel trilogy, because I make more allowances for the fact that the First Order had a planet-killing machine if Palpatine was behind it, because like Palpatine has been obsessed with planet-killing machines for longer than 30 years, for the entire spans of the Star Wars saga that we get. Palpatine was obsessed with planet-killing machines. And like it makes sense why the First Order would want one,
Yep.
because Palpatine was at least somewhat secretly behind it all.
Well, and like I know that's something a lot of people had issues with, is like, oh, it's a fleet of planet killers. I'm like, yeah, but that's the most realistic thing Palpatine would do. He's not going to be like, after decades and decades of planet killers, I'm going to try biological warfare. Like, he's not
Yep.
gonna change. He's not gonna be a different character. Like, that just goes down to whether or not you're gonna accept that Palpatine is the villain. And I was apprehensive about Palpatine being the villain, but I like what they did. And it also ties into what was set up with Operation Cinder, because Operation
Yep.
Cinder was all about punishing the galaxy for losing its emperor, and now the emperor is back, and he wants to rule over rubble. Like, he wants to just destroy the whole galaxy, because that's just what he does. He doesn't care. Like, he's gonna be in some sort of weird possessed body. Like, he doesn't care if he rules over rocks. Like, he's just gonna wreck everything. So like, I get the critique, but I also am like, yeah, but that's Palpatine.
Yeah.
Like, that's
Well, and that's why I'm saying I think it's more forgivable if it was Palpatine all along, because otherwise it reads as, man, why can't this series come up with a new idea?
mm-hmm.
But if it's Palpatine all along, it reads, man, wasn't this one guy super obsessed with this one thing?
Right. Yeah, I don't know.
But
Okay, so there's still so much we haven't talked about, but
we haven't talked about 3PO. We haven't talked about how Chewie died and then didn't die, and there was a whole rescue mission worked into this film.
And the whole story of the archaeologist guy that was like looking for the Wayfinders and also happened to like kill Rey's parents. We haven't talked about the Force Skype fighting. We haven't talked about the actual destruction of Palpatine. Like, we've been going an hour and 44 minutes, and we've still barely come close to everything you could talk about in this movie.
I think it's pretty safe to say that we're going to have more streams about this. In the future. There's a lot more to say.
But I don't know. I guess really quickly for the Force Skype stuff, it's been my theory for a long time that Rey and Kylo have been using the World Between Worlds. Like, literally, like, I think it was a day or two after the World Between Worlds episode of Rebels, I did a video on it, because it makes so much sense that that's how they're doing it. And what's talked about with the World Between Worlds is that you can be using it without knowing that you're using it, because you have to have a certain awareness of it to perceive the space within. But like, you can kind of be moving within and using it, and that comes from Rebels, because Dave Filoni said that season 1 of Rebels, when Ezra talks to Yoda, they're using the World Between Worlds. It just looks different because Ezra has a different appreciation of the Force in the first season versus the fourth, and so he sees less. So like, Rey and Kylo, and like, this movie proved that they don't really see what's going on. Like, Kylo says, I can't see your surroundings, can you see mine, in The Last Jedi, but it gets brushed over really quickly. But when they're having that fight, this actually made me really happy, because I'd said that the moment where they're fighting and they knock down the stand and Vader's mask rumbles over, I said I was going to be really mad if they took this emotional moment and ruined it by putting it in the trailer. Well, as it turns out, it wasn't really that emotional of a moment, because it wasn't the destruction of Vader's mask. What happened was they knocked the stand over, and Vader's mask falls from Rey's side into where Kylo is, and then Kylo goes, oh, that's where you are. But that to me proves that they can't tell, like, we're perceiving it as Kijimi or Kylo's quarters, but they must be perceiving it as that black space that is the World Between Worlds, because they can't see where the other person is. Also, Rey just happened to be in Kylo's quarters, and he was like, oh, hey, there you are, I'll come find you. But, that's a whole other thing.
I did have some questions about that, just to get some of the things not the being in his quarters. That's a different line of questions.
Right.
But one, do you think that they have more control over when it happens now, or is it still beyond their ability? Because in The Last Jedi, like, every time it happened, it may not have been random, but it wasn't up to them that it happened when it did. But there were at least once or twice in Rise of Skywalker where it looked like Kylo intentionally connected to Rey.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Is that how you read that?
That is how I read that. I think that Snoke / Palpatine via Snoke is the one that started the Force Skypes in Last Jedi. I don't think they knew how to do it, especially because they both seemed very surprised that it was happening. Kylo even says, "You can't be doing this. The effort would kill you." I don't believe that Snoke bridged their minds. I think their minds were bridged because of their bond, because they were a dyad. I still think that the interrogation scene where they went into each other's minds activated it, but I used to think that that's kind of like where it was created. I don't think that anymore. I just think that's where it like started. Again, Last Jedi is like 2 days after The Force Awakens, so it makes sense it hadn't started yet. I think Snoke kick-started it, but then obviously they had some ability to do it, because at the end of The Last Jedi, they have one final one after Snoke is dead. And yeah, I think that's the implication when Kylo puts his hand on Vader's mask, and then like Rey, they either Skype then, or Rey has her vision. I can't remember, because it's been 2 days now since I've seen the movie. But there's some kind of indication that what he's doing is causing Rey to see and feel things. And to an earlier point, I do think that much of Rey's visions that she's receiving in Rise of Skywalker are coming from Palpatine. So I don't believe that Palpatine isn't actually mentally working on Rey, just because it's not more explicitly said. But yeah, I think Kylo at the very least has control over it. Rey might have control over it, but I don't think she wants to see Kylo at that point.
Right. My other question was going to be, do you because I agree with all of that. Do you think that in the intervening time between the films that they still had these periodic conversations, or is this the first time that this has happened since the Falcon at the end of The Last Jedi?
I think this is the first time. I think it's possible that Kylo didn't know as much outside of the moment how to do it, and or neither of them wanted to. But I think to Rey's reaction to seeing him on Pisana, when she's like freaking out, and that's what causes her to think she killed Chewie. I don't think she reacts that way if she talked to him last Friday. So like, I think the intensity to which she reacted to him means that they hadn't seen each other. I think that Noelle asks, wait, does that mean Palpatine had some connection now to the World Between Worlds? Palpatine always had a connection to the World Between Worlds, because in Rebels, those episodes are the ones where Palpatine shows up, and he's trying to trick Ezra into letting him into the World Between Worlds. The trick with his parents. So Palpatine has always had an interest in the World Between Worlds. I think that he could go to Kylo and say, hey, here's how you can find the scavenger, this thing that you use. Let me show you how to access it, since you have use for it. And I think that's another thing that Palpatine wants them for, is, again, so he can gain access to the World Between Worlds. Like, all of it completely lines up with things we've seen in other material.
Well, and I thought that too once I learned that the Kylo scene at the beginning is on Mustafar.
Yep.
Like, we know that Vader's castle had what we think is a doorway into the World Between Worlds too.
Or at least a dark version of it, yeah.
Right. And so, like, I feel like that connects all that together too.
I agree. So there's that, and then we really haven't talked about Chewbacca or 3PO much. At risk of making this go on too long, I really want to talk about Rey at the end when she can talk to all the other Jedi. I like this. It's basically Endgame, right? Like, Thanos says, "I am inevitable," and Tony says, "I am Iron Man." Only I like this movie much better. It is kind of distracting that it's almost the same scene. But I like this idea that Palpatine's like, I am every Sith. And I like to think that maybe Palpatine, like, literally is every Sith. Like, maybe he has absorbed the life force of every Sith before him, where Rey communes with and taps into the life force of every Jedi before her, and, like, that's the difference. And I like that she tries to do that at the beginning of the movie. You know, she's floating with all the rocks, and she's, like, saying, be with me, and it doesn't work. And then it does at the end. But there's that shot where it, like, goes out into space, and that felt very World Between Worlds-y for me.
Yeah. And I think, too, that's what I was going to say. It would be ironic to me if it was Palpatine's connection to the World Between Worlds on Exegol that allowed Rey to have that connection to the Jedi at the end.
That's true.
But either way, I love that scene. I feel like Um, that one line of dialogue from Anakin
Yep.
is enough to like quell
Make-
all my fears about
Same.
the
Yep.
sequel trilogy. You know, undoing what Anakin did. I love that we hear from Mace Windu. I love
Yep.
that we hear from old and young Obi-Wan. I
Yep.
love that Anakin is there. I didn't realize this at the time, but I'm utterly heartbroken that Kanan and Ahsoka are there.
Yep.
Especially for what that means for Ahsoka.
Ahsoka.
Um,
Well, I mean, if
but
it's the world between worlds, she could be dead, or that could be
she could, while she was there.
while she was trapped in the world between worlds, because
That's fair.
there wouldn't be time in the world between worlds, and we know she spent time in the world between worlds, so that could have happened then, because like when you're in the world between worlds, you're separate from time and space.
Right. But wasn't there a thing, and this is taking me out of the moment here, but wasn't there a thing in the Rebels episodes where we hear Kylo
Yeah,
and where we hear Rey
Kylo.
in that scene too?
I think Kylo's lines were the only lines said by somebody who was a Darksider at the time. Like there were Anakin lines, but they were Anakin lines and not Vader, if I remember correctly. Kylo's were the only that were Darksider at the time that you heard in the world between worlds.
But I feel like that makes all that make some sense there
more
too.
sense. Yeah, I think so too. And I'm sorry, I love the idea that a Palpatine stood in front of another Palpatine, and every Jedi in history decided, we will help her. We are going to help a Palpatine take the galaxy back. I think that's so amazing.
Yep.
That's part of what really jazzes me up. And I was saying before, like, Emperor Palpatine doesn't get redeemed, but the name Palpatine kind of does. And yes, I get it. At the end, Rey turns away from the name Palpatine. She never fully accepted the name Palpatine, and takes the name Skywalker. But it's still the legacy of Emperor Palpatine that his granddaughter rejected his legacy, stood against him, and stood with the Jedi. And that to me is something I never knew I needed out of Star Wars. But like the level of cleansing for the galaxy that Rey does, to say, I am literally like the spawn of the devil, and I'm gonna say no to unlimited power. She rejects the throne. You know, she rejected the throne to Kylo. She rejects the throne to her grandfather, and she stands there a Jedi. And I get so energized. Like, so many people have said this movie is like heartbreaking or depressing. I'm like, I am so energized by that. Like, that is so awe-inspiring to me. Who she is to do that.
Well, and I think the film ends on such a hopeful note too. Noelle says his death looked cool. It reminded me of Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yeah.
When they get their faces melted. But I feel like this film ends on such a hopeful note for me, and I'm sad that other people have interpreted it differently. Not that I think I'm right or they're wrong, but like when she goes back to Tatooine and buries the lightsabers of Luke and Leia there, you know, and when she claims that name for herself while she's looking at Luke and Leia, like that is just such a hopeful ending for me.
Yeah.
To say, you know, this is where it has all brought us, and it's a moment of hope for the end. She stares out into that same sunset over the same Force theme, and like that's just, I mean, the one of the only things I would have changed about this is I would have loved for Kylo or for Ben to have been there in some form or fashion. But it's, I don't know, it's such, like Sen says, you know, it's the heart of Star Wars. It's hope. It starts with hope and it ends with hope. And I think that's such a fitting circle for that.
Right. You know, I loved it. I too wish Ben was there. I'm holding out. The reason why Ben's not there is because of plans. Like, obviously, there's not going to be an episode 10, short of something else, something weird happening. And, like, obviously, whatever would happen would probably be in a book form. But I'm kind of hoping that it's like, you know, his life force is in her, so she can kind of still sense him, or he wasn't there because she was just bearing the 2 lightsabers. She wasn't bearing his lightsaber. So some kind of reason. That's literally the only thing I didn't like. And I'm holding out that there's a reason. But I love the ending. And people think, she's trapped there, but she's not exiling herself there. Like, even in a world where she decides to move in, she has a ship. She can leave anytime she wants.
Right,
Like, she's not gonna just stay there. She has her friends. Like, what's wrong with that? And I think there's something beautiful about she's planting these lightsabers in the desert. It's something that's barren, and yet she can bring life back to it. And I like that she claims the name Skywalker, because in the same way, like, her choices purify the legacy of Palpatine, then this pure good being taking on the name Skywalker is like, I'm a fresh start for the Skywalker. Like, I'm a fresh start for the name Skywalker. I love it. I think it's a hopeful ending. I really do.
I think so too. And I love, to the extent that Rey's journey was one about her identity.
Yep.
I love that she ends making a choice saying, this is who I am.
Yep.
Yep.
I have decided.
Yeah.
They'll grow into lightsaber trees. I wish.
I mean, it works with Skittles, right?
Right, so it'll work with lightsabers, obviously. And then I love her lightsaber is made out of her saber staff, like we all wanted.
Yeah.
I like that it's a different kind of color. I just think there's so much more for Rey. And I don't know. Like, again, I love the Palpatine thing, and people are going off about how, like, it means, well, you can change the galaxy if you're one of the 2 lines, and, like, I've seen that so many, and I get it, and I accept it. My opinion, if there was only The Force Awakens, Last Jedi, Rise of Skywalker, which there wouldn't really be in this capacity, certain things would have to change. But if there was only this trilogy, Rey being a nobody would make way more sense. Rey being a Palpatine is way better in a 9-movie saga. And because I have been on this train for a long time, I prefer the ending for the 9-movie saga. I think the people who are more upset, this isn't a general rule, but I think the people who more wanted Rey Nobody are the people who more wanted 7, 8, and 9 to like be 7, 8, to be an epilogue.
Standalone.
Yeah. To be more of an epilogue to 1 through 6 instead of being part of 1 through 9. Because I agree that if you look at it as 7, 8, and 9, it's a weird choice, but I think it's a great choice for 1 through
9. Yeah. Jay says, I wish we could see the whole thing. Is it double blade? I wouldn't mind if it was double blade.
I hope so.
Especially if it's got like a little flick to it like Dark Rey had. I think that would be cool.
That would be neat.
Like especially if Rey was like, that was a good
idea.
Whole thing was traumatic, but that part's a good idea.
I like that part. We'll do that.
Rey will start a Jedi Academy on Yavin, and the Grysk will invade, and Ezra and Thrawn come back to defeat the Grysk. Yep,
sure.
I'm down for that.
Yep, I'm down. Just put Baby Yoda in there somewhere.
Yeah. Dale, I mean, she could move into Tatooine, but if she does, I think it's a choice. I don't think she's going into exile, and I definitely don't think she's trapped there.
Yeah, no. I think she might just want to commune there because, I mean, I think it was Cal, but I'm not sure who said it. Somebody said that, like, Naboo and Tatooine could be a Force nexus. I think it's possible that there's, like, a lot of Force energy there just because of the things that happened on Tatooine. I am kind of bummed that we didn't see Naboo because of Ben's grandmother being from Naboo and Rey's grandfather being from Naboo. Like, I do think that would have been cool to work in there somewhere, somehow, but I don't know where it would have gone in the story that we got. So it would have required some kind of story change.
I think with Tatooine too, I think it makes sense. One, because I think she wants to bury the lightsabers there. But like, not only is that where Luke is from, like that's where like Luke went back to Tatooine for Obi-Wan's journals to build his lightsaber.
Yep.
And like Tatooine was where Obi-Wan communed with Qui-Gon to learn, how to live after death. Like, like I feel like all of that knowledge is there too.
Yep.
But
yeah, I mean,
with our friend James in the chat, I will say, like, I had a new appreciation for all of that after he's been there recently.
Yeah, that's true.
whether on location in
Ugh.
Tunisia.
I'm gonna be honest with you guys. Like, I know we didn't get to Chewie. I know we didn't get to 3PO. We definitely didn't talk. We didn't talk about Lando at all. There's
Or
so much
Babu Frick.
or Babu Frick. We didn't talk about so much in this movie, but we've been talking for like 2 hours, and I'm getting tired.
Yeah, I think we're going to have to call it soon, but we're definitely going to have to talk more about this. But I will say, too, there's still a lot of Star Wars stuff going on because next week is the season finale of The Mandalorian, and there's still Resistance going on.
Yep.
Project Luminous is coming up.
Yep.
So we definitely want to have more of these conversations, but know that this is still like such an exciting time to be a Star Wars fan. There's still so much to get into.
Yep.
And we're going to be here for it all. So I know you've got some stuff planned for the rest of the week, and then you're going on a little journey of your own
to a surprise location we'll know more about soon.
But we'll still be around. We may take a little hit over the holidays just to even things out and take some time for ourselves, but we will definitely be around. In the meantime, you can find us on all the regular places, on our Discord, on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, all of those things. We're on different sides now, so I'll have to point them.
There you
go. But you can find us in all the regular places. And while you're here, go ahead and hit that notification bell if you're subscribed. And like the stream, and you'll find out every time we go live. But I think that's what we've got for today. So
yeah, thanks guys
all
so
hail
much.
Empress Palpatine.
Yep, all hail our Empress and our Jedi Queen. I don't even know. She's everything to me now. To me, she's royalty. That's what I've been saying. All right. But I'll talk to you guys later. So long.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.